All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another round of questions and answers. And besides the two forums I belong to, like I said, my videos, I belong to a club, and there's probably close to 20 of us. We don't all meet, of course, at the same time, but a lot of us. And we discuss different topics. Now, one topic of conversation that I thought was interesting, and there's a bunch of us that do a lot of woodworking stuff, we talked about using shellac. Now, the thing about shellac is, yes, you can buy it in a store. It's that Zinzer Bullseye shellac. Let me show you a couple of pictures of it. Okay, now the amber stuff is waxed shellac. It has wax in it. Now the seal coat is de-waxed. I prefer using de-waxed because I can put any finish under it or over it for the most part, and it's kind of what I stick with. Now, that seal coat stuff is a 2 pound cut. And I'll explain all this to you in just a sec. So the thing is what people worry about in using that kind of shellac is, well, it does have a shelf life. And some people say, well, if the can's sealed, it's up to 3 years. If you've opened the can and you're using it, you're probably looking at 6 to 8 months. And you got different opinions on how long the shelf life is on it. Now, let me explain it this way. If you're using it and you put it on, and that alcohol flashes off in seconds, if you've let it sit there for several minutes or more and it's still tacky, the odds are the shellac's no good anymore. So the thing is I buy flakes of shellac, and let me show you an Amazon, advertisement real quick. Okay, so I buy the flakes, but there's nothing wrong with this canned stuff if you think you're going to use that much of it. Those come in quart cans. And it's like, well, how do you determine what the shelf life is? Well, let me show you a lot number and I'll give you an explanation. Okay, so you can see from that, you can kind of figure out from there what the shelf life might be. Now, I don't like doing that. Like I said, I can save money and I can make the shellac to my liking fairly fast and easy, and we'll get into that. I use two kinds, well, three kinds. I'll explain to you the third one, which is a little oddballish, but I make a 1.5 pound cut and I make a 2 pound cut. And I'm going to show you exactly how I do that in just a second. Now, one of the things out there that we talked about is, okay, so you would need a scale, like a little postal scale. And I'll show you what it looks like off Amazon. And if you have one, I mean, a coffee grinder would be great because it will actually take those flakes, make it into a powder, which makes it, when it comes to dissolving, much easier. But you don't need that really. You could take the shellac flakes, put them in a paper towel or a shop towel, smash it up with a hammer, and put it in the container and go from there. Or not even do it at all and just leave the flakes whole. It's just going to take a little bit longer for it to dissolve and make you, a nice liquid shellac. So you're not in a rush. Don't even worry about it. You don't need the grinder and you don't need to hammer it, but you can always hammer it. There's always a way around it. Okay, now I'm in California and they don't sell denatured alcohol anymore, but you could still buy it off Amazon. So we got the isopropyl alcohol. And if you're going to use that, and yes, I do, I go to the dollar store and they've got two types there, usually 90% and 70%. So I buy the 70% and sometimes I buy the 90. Now I use the 70% for just cleanup, okay? I don't use it for mixing the shellac. I want 90% or better. Or, what you can do is take a look on Amazon and I get the anhydrous isopropyl alcohol, and that works very well. And if you don't get that, but you're still getting the 99%, it's going to work fine. But use the higher percentages for mixing, the shellac. So that's one tip. Now, I'm going to show you how I mix these, okay, and then I'm going to show you how I apply it. I mean, I got a project over on the lathe I'll pan over in a few minutes and I'll show you. Now, here's the thing. When I make this, and I can make it in different amounts. And I'm going to explain that to you in a second. Okay. But I always mark the container when I'm done making it with a line, a fill line. And after every use, I remark that line, because if I don't use it for a while and alcohol evaporates, I know how much more alcohol to put in there to get it back to, the strength that it was. So I always mark the containers in the beginning and after each use. I mean, it's a little bit of tip. If you're not doing it, you might try it, because it actually keeps the product consistent. Okay, so like we were talking about, I don't make a big quantity of this. I mean, so I make what equals like probably around 10 ounces, and I'm going to show you how I do it here. I'll put up like a still picture here. To make the 2-pound cut, I use 8 ounces of alcohol and 2 ounces of flakes. Well, I don't want to make that much of it. Okay, we'll cut it in half. I mean, use 4 ounces and then use 1 ounce of flakes, and that'll get you the 2-pound cut. Now, the other 1.5-pound cut, like I said, I usually make them in one of those, well, what are they, sauce jars or whatever. And so I can transfer it into containers. But on the 1.5-pound cut, you're looking at 1.5 ounces of the flakes and 8 ounces of alcohol. You want something in a smaller amount, then do 1 ounce of flakes and do 6 ounces of alcohol. Anyway, it'll give you the 1.5-pound cut and the 2-pound cut. Now, those are the two mixtures that work best for me, because I'm not making a large amount of it. And if I start to run out, I can make more. If I'm using lacquer, polyurethane, oil sanding, or doing something different, it sits there for a while, I don't worry about it, because I know you can mark a date on the bottle and you've already got your line on there. I just don't worry about it. And if it starts to get too old, it didn't cost that much to make anyway by making it by way of the flakes. I just throw it out, clean the container, and start over. Okay, as with any project, and I've mentioned this in my videos before, you have to have a good sanding protocol to start. So here's one real quick. I'll show you. I put it in my videos all the time. Okay, so let's assume, you have sanded this and you've sanded it up to the point where, okay, you're ready to put on the shellac. Okay, and you've hand sanded it with the grain, you've cleaned it off real well. And I always either use alcohol or mineral spirits as like a final thing before any finish, to make sure that I've got the impurities and anything on that wood, I've got it as absolutely clean as I can before I start applying my finish. So I told you I have 3 containers. So I've got my 2-pound, my 1.5-pound, and I have my little experimental bottle. Now, so what's the deal with the experimental bottle? I'm going to show you 2 different ways to apply the shellac here in a minute, one by hand, one by a single action sprayer. Now, if I'm applying it by hand and it's a small project, I can get away with 1 or 2 swipes in each direction, and I go from there. Okay, so in the third bottle, my experimental bottle, or whatever you want to call it, I take 3 ounces of that 2-pound cut shellac mixture, and I add 1 ounce of mineral spirits to it. So why would I do that? Okay, what I have found, and it's not a problem, is it gives me a longer time to apply it. And as you get into bigger projects that are not small anymore, you're going to get streaks and marks and everything else. And out at the club, they say, well, you could just get, like some cloth with alcohol and go over it real quick and it'll get rid of them. Or, hey, don't worry about it. The next coat is going to turn around and dissolve into that and you'll get rid of it. Or, you can always use 4/0 steel wool and then you can go over again and add all these different thoughts. Okay, but what I found is by adding the mineral spirits to it, it gives you a longer time on the application part before it starts to get tacky and set up, and it reduces streaks, marks, and everything else. And one of them out there goes, yeah, but you end up with an oily surface. No, I leave it alone for several minutes till I know that the shellac is set up, and you can just wipe it off with a cloth and it comes right off. I don't see that it's hurt anything so far, and I keep it around, and I do use it on larger projects that I'm applying the shellac by hand to. Out at the club, one of the guys said, well, weighing the flakes and doing this and doing that, that sounds like a pain. And I told him, well, you have a better way to do it. And he goes, I just take a container, and he goes, I'll put measure it, like let's say you got a hobby bottle or you got something and he's telling me, well, I just measure on the bottle and make a mark at the 1 inch mark up. I add flakes to it, and then I go up 10 inches from there and I add alcohol. And he goes, well, I think that gives me around, this 2.5 pound cut. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm sure that it works for him and it works fine, as with everything else, or whatever works for you is fine. I do it the measuring way and the way I showed you. It's not a big deal to weigh this stuff out, put it in a container, shake it. I put a very clean nut in the bottom of all of the containers. That way, when I shake it, it helps agitate everything up easy. So that's another tip for you. Just take a clean nut, bolt, or something heavy, drop it in the container, put it in there, and like I said, just dissolve it all, because afterwards I'm going to strain it anyway. I'll get out any impurities and what have you, but then I always clean that bottle out. I have it ready for the next time I'm going to mix it. And I always have that nut in the bottom of it. And it works great because I just take and go like this. Every once in a while, I shake it frequently. And usually, like if I make it, in the afternoon on one day, by the next morning, it's totally dissolved. I'm not in a rush. I've never kept track of the time. And a lot of times I just throw the whole flakes in there, like I was telling you. I don't even smash them because I don't want to mess with it, or sometimes I do. It just depends on my mood. But always by the next morning or so, by shaking it, I keep it, like in a hobby bottle with a top on it. And I have it inside and I just shake it frequently and it comes out fine by morning. I'm going to pan over here to the lathe and we'll talk about the application now. I'm going to explain to you how I do it by hand, and I'm going to explain to you how I do it with my little hobby sprayer. Okay, I have a project on the lathe right now. And what I've done with this is I've sanded it up to 320. And then I turned around, I used a 1.5 pound cut. I put 2 coats on there. Then I went over it with 4/0 steel wool. Now, another tip on the 4/0 steel wool, I use that 70% alcohol from the dollar store. And I clean the steel wool because it's got like a light oil in it. And I don't want that in there. I'm trying to make my finishes as nice and perfect as I can. So it's been cleaned, and I use the 4/0 steel wool after 2 to 3 coats, and I go over this. Then I clean it real well. Now I'm ready to go ahead and I'm ready to apply the 2 pound cut. Now I have a hobby bottle. Like I said, you can get them anywhere, Michael's or online, what have you. And I've got my 2 pound cut. And I have my cloth. And I saturate this, and I start up here, and I start going like this. And I may only swipe over this area once or twice, and then I move on. If you don't, on these larger projects, you're going to start getting streaks and marks. Then you're going to have to go through the things that I mentioned earlier in the video, and I work my way down like that. Now, how many coats would I put on if I was doing this one by hand? You put it on until you feel that you have the finish that you want. And at that point, if I put on 2 or 3 coats of the 2 pound, at that point, I steel wool it again, clean it off real well. I put on another 2 or 3, steel wool it, clean it off real well, and I keep going. And then it gets all the little nubs and the stuff that settles on there off of it. My last coat, I don't do anything afterwards. You put it on, leave it alone, don't touch it, you're done. Now, a lot of times what I'll do, because I think it looks better, is I clean it off one final time after I'm happy with the number of coats that's on there. I clean it off with the 4/0 steel wool, and I'll put some kind of wax on there. Carnauba, I've got regular beeswax, I've got, Minwax, just regular wax. I've used them all, and it makes a nice, warm looking finish to them. Now, that's one way, by hand. The other way that I found on larger projects that works great for me is to use a hobby sprayer. That's the Badger. And I'm going to show you what I do here, and I'm going to spray it. Then I take that hobby sprayer, and I have plenty of my 2 pound cut in here. And I'm going to spray this, and I'm going to overlap it about 50%. This will put on a little bit thicker coat normally than you would have put on by hand, but let me show you. I'm going to show you the way that I do it. It works for me. If you do something different, I think that's fine. I'm going to spray this area up here first on this, and I'm going to bring it back to right here, and then I'm going to do the very bottom And then I'm going to take longer swipes. This will have already set up to a large degree before I do those larger swipes. I'll show you. I'm turning it by hand. Find a starting point and then do that. Now I come down to the bottom. Again, I'll find a starting point like this crack. Okay. Then you can stop. You've got plenty of time because you're spraying. One coat will dissolve into the other. It kind of burns into the previous coat. So now I find my starting point. I just go like this and wrap it around. Sorry about that. The compressor kicked on. I find a starting point. I've done up here. I've done below. I find my starting point. I just start going like this, overlapping about 50%. That top part's already dried, so I'm not worried about it. Get any runs in it, don't worry about it. You can get those out easy enough. Okay, and I come back around to where I started and I stop. Now, this is a little bit thicker coat than putting it on by hand, so this is going to take a little bit more time to dry. But I like doing it this way because on this wood, it's very porous. So this is helping to also fill in those pores. Now, like I said before, after I put on several coats of this, and I can see here where it looks like it needs some more. And when you're spraying it, it's a little bit more forgiving. That's all I'm saying. So I will do this over and over, and after every 3 coats, 2 or 3 coats, I'll hit it with that 4/0 steel wool. I'll keep applying it until I get up to where I think I'm satisfied and I'm done. Now you have a decision at that point. I can cut this off and I can just leave it alone, like I told you, even on the hand ones. Or what I really like to do is I turn around on that very last coat and I'll very lightly go over this with that 4/0 steel wool. And then I clean it off real well and I'll use either Carnauba or some kind of paste wax, put it on there. It gives it a very nice warm feel. So the question at the club is, well, if I'm doing it by hand, how many coats did I put on? Well, I put on anywhere from, like if I count all of them, 10, 12 coats. And they dry because the alcohol flashes off almost instantly. I can keep applying coats very quickly and get up to that point. Maybe more, might do less. It's up to you, the kind of wood you're using, to determine when you want to stop. All right, a couple of questions when I was out at the club. The first question is, you just run this straight off of a compressor? No, I don't. Now, I have a canister filter, but when I come off of the canister filter, even with my airline, I go into a disposable filter, and then from there it goes to the little hobby sprayer, and that keeps out all the contaminants, moisture, and so forth, because it will affect your finish. Now, you don't need that kind of a setup. My friend has just the disposable inline ones, and they work fine for this kind of application. So you can buy those really cheap, put one inline on your air hose that goes to just before you get to your gun. So those are fairly cheap. So I put one in just before it goes to my airline to my little hobby sprayer. And so I've got like 2 of them that it goes through, but you don't need to do that, like I said. Now, when I'm done with this, what about the cleaning? Well, like I told you, I have a little tub and I use that 70% alcohol. And I clean out the container really well and I wipe it clean. And I do the same thing with the little siphon tube that's in here. Now this up here is your tip, and this is adjustable here. So when you first start to use this, my recommendation is you put water in it. Adjust this and your PSI. Now I have a PSI, I think, goes from 24 to 28. It works fine off of my compressor. That's where I'm happy with that. Because I got the pressure I want, then I just simply twist this till I get the spray pattern that I want. At that point, you're done. You don't have to mess with it. Now, to clean that hole where the siphon tube comes up, the siphon tube in that 70% alcohol will come clean. Up here, this metal part and where the tip is, you're going to need a needle. This is the 25 gauge hypodermic needle. cleans it right out. Or anything that's real fine that you can get through that hole, that will work too. And I have brushes, so when I put all of this in at 70% alcohol, I clean everything really well, wipe it clean, put it away. I'm good to go next time. All right, there we go. Just let it dry. And then, like I said, make your determination. Steel wool it one last time, put on the wax, leave it alone because you're very happy with it, and you're done. And that's a quick, easy way to apply the shellac. I like applying it with this Badger. It's a really handy little hobby sprayer. They're inexpensive. And like I said, just easy to keep clean with alcohol and a needle in a little basin. And the dollar store alcohol is 70%, works good. For mixture, use greater than 90% if you're in California. All right, folks, I'm the Home Handyman. I hope you click subscribe. Keep following me. And my cats appreciate it, my stray ones that hang around. I'll see you on the next video. You folks have a great day.